Okay, geographers, let's get into part 2 of this editing, our little stretch of Amargosa Creek. So we set up this folder connection to get our geodatabase 220 into this existing map project. And I should note there are some different ways you could handle working with one geodatabase. And depending on where you're working, if you're working for some big entity, some government agency, or massive business, or whatever, you might have some enterprise level GIS, as they call it, where there's kind of a central server and it's, getting beamed onto your computer. Effectively, you're doing the work, but it's all stored in one location. And if that's the case, there are other ways to handle this. There are other ways that you could also just solve this problem on your computer. I just thought this would be a way to show some functionality, but always keep that in mind with these things. I'm showing you one way to do stuff, but it's by no means the best way or the only way. Often it's just the way I think is the best way to highlight certain functionality, ways to do things, stuff like that. But anyway, that's an aside. We created the Antelope Valley data set in here as well. And there's one other thing I want us to do before we get moving with the actual editing part of things. And so that's right click on Geodatabase 220 and go up to domains. Okay, a domain is something used in these geodatabases and just databases in general. It's a way to confine data records in fields. We're going to see how this works momentarily. Okay? But this is a very useful thing to do to actually create when working with editing like this, where you're going to be going in, making a bunch of features in there, drawing a bunch of lines in this thing, and you're going to be updating their records in the attribute table, and you don't want to have to type the same thing over and over, right? It's a pain to do. It takes time. There's also a greater chance of making a mistake, making a little typo or whatever, and misspelling one record. And then when you're going to work with the data set later on, you're doing some, query, select by attributes, whatever it might be. You don't get all the records because one or multiple ones are misspelled, and so they don't match, right? So domain is just a nice way to simplify this stuff, but you got to be thinking about it ahead of time before you start things. Okay. So in domains, and we're going to see how this works. So it's kind of abstract. Don't worry about it. But again, just right click on here, go up to domains, click on that, and it brings up this little window thing, whatever. And it says click here to add a new domain. I will. And I'll just go ahead and call this one. How about, I'm trying to keep it simple. I'll do stream, but I'll get rid of vowels to keep it short, underscore, and type. Okay. That it could be storm. I guess we'll add it like that. I don't think that's a problem lengthwise. Stream type. That works. Let's see. Oh, in description, I could explain okay, so let's do that. Let's make that shorter. And then here, type of stream. Okay, the field type is going to be text. Okay, this is where we can choose from some different possibilities in here, but I want to have actual words in there. So text is good. Domain type, coded value domain or range. We're going to do the coded value. Okay, split policy, merge policy. Okay, we'll just leave all that as default. Okay, in here on the right, it says code and description. So if I click here to, add a new one, I'll do 0 on 01 as my code. Okay, it's just number one. It's a case where having that zero in front of the one, sometimes with how things line up in databases and tables and stuff like that, it treats it as the actual number one. It's kind of silly. It's computer stuff. You don't have to do this, but I'm going to do it. Again, it's convention. It's what I'm used to. And so in here, what I'm going to do, since this is a type of stream, I'm going to have three possible types. Okay. The first one is perennial, meaning it's a year round stream. Okay. So perennial. That's my first one. My second one, O2. There we go. And I'm just clicking. If it's not letting you type or highlighting it or whatever, just slowly click again and be patient. But the second one, I'm going to do intermittent. Make sure I spelled that correct. And so with intermittent, meaning it's a seasonal stream, right? Like in the rainy time of the year, it'll be flowing. The dry time of the year, it's empty. Okay, it's dried up. That's what that one means. And then our third one, oops, is ephemeral. And with this, it means that it isn't just, dry half of the year and full the other half of the year. It's when it rains, right? When there's water flowing, this thing's going to fill up, but after a while, it's going to disappear, even in the rainiest time of the year. Okay. So these are our three types of streams or water bodies or whatever that we have, water courses, I should say. All right. And this way, when we're going in and we're making our little Amargosa Creek thing, we can have a field in there that's type or stream type or whatever. And we can select from these. It'll be a drop down, kind of like what we saw, over here. This is a domain that we're dealing with. This is what we're going to see when we're editing. So we don't have to go in and type these. And it's also very useful if you have multiple people working on a data set. You might have people who have different ways to describe stream types, right? Some different terminology that's not even here. Maybe there's something that, perennial stream, maybe there's another way to describe it, right? And so you're typing in perennial and the other person working on it is using this other term, means the same thing, but totally different as far as the database is concerned. So again, domains, very useful when you can use them, but again, kind of have to plan with this stuff. So once we have it looking like this, okay, we're cool. We're going to hit save up here. And that should be happy. Okay, we can go back here. You can close this if you want, leave it. Doesn't matter. But now what we can do is in our little Antelope Valley thing, we can right click and go new feature class. Okay, and we're going to call this streams. All right, just generic stuff. And the reason for this is I don't just want to have an Amargosa Creek feature class. So then I go find some other water course and I have, this other one, separate one for that, and then another one for that. No, I want to have a master streams data, feature class for this area. So this will be one of potentially multiple streams that I add in here. And I'm not going to make you do every single thing in the entire Antelope Valley or Mojave Desert or whatever. But this is what you want to be thinking about, right? Do I want to make a feature class for just this one entity, right? This little strip right here, or do I want to kind of plan big? Do I want to anticipate the larger project, the larger data set? And that's what we're trying to do. In here, alias, we could call it whatever. We could put in our capital letters and all of that stuff. The alias is what it's going to show when we bring it over here into the map into the contents pane. This is what it'll put into the legend if you add a legend to your layout and all of that. Okay, so we'll call that. Feature class type, the type of features stored in the feature class. We're going to want to do line. And the idea being that, yeah, we want to draw in this represented as a line. Now, the other thing we can do, so I was kind of initially thinking we do, but maybe we won't. We'll see how this goes. Maybe we do it, maybe we don't. But we could also make a polygon one. All right, if you just want to have the actual area which it covers. I mean, you think about it, a river in general, whether it's a massive one or a tiny creek like this, any water course it's going through, it has not only a length but a width to it. So you can represent that as a polygon. That makes sense, right? This isn't just a single line here, it's a shape. So you can do that. We're not going to do it now. We're going to stick with the line thing just to start with, just because it's easier. So we got line, geometric properties, two key things here. Okay, M values, and it's nice. It explains it here. That's for route data. If we're gonna, calculate our journey down the creek, we're not. And then Z values, if you're doing some kind of 3D stuff, we're not going to do that with that. So I'm going to uncheck this here. Okay, add output dataset to current map. It means when I hit finish, it's going to throw it in here. We can leave that. But what I want to do, you see page 1 through 6 or 1 of 6. I want to go next through all of these things before I just hit finish. Technically, I could hit finish at any time, but no, I want to really build this, and again, take my time. So this is the attribute table, and it's going to have this object ID. That's just a default thing. This is this unique identifier or primary key in database speak. And with this, it's just going to number the different features. So however many lines I make, it's going to give it a unique number in here. So it knows that these are unique records. So it's kind of a behind the scenes thing, nothing we need to think about. The shape field, same kind of deal. It's for the computer to know this is a line, so treat it as such. Don't have to worry about that. But we can add anything we want at this point. So click here to add new field. I will. The first one I'm going to do is name. Okay, I'm just going to have a name for whatever the little water course is. So I type in, Amargosa for this one here. And again, in doing this, I'm not confined to just one course of water in the area. I can do all of the different creeks and streams and throw the aqueduct in there and all this stuff and distinguish them by the name. Okay, data type, I had to double click to get out of that. Long, that refers to a number. Most of these are numbers or like dates, kind of self-explanatory. We want text. Okay, and with this within here, okay, this text, it defaults to 255 characters. Now, this used to be crucial back when hard drives were tiny, storage was quite limited. You wanted to be careful because every single character you add, that's taking up storage space. So you want it to be as deliberate as possible. Not so important today. At the same time, that's a lot in here. I'm going to drop this to, I'm going to say 50. Let's do 75 just to be safe. This is something you could really think about. Again, there's no shame in leaving that 255, but it's also just having that much. It can be a bit much. Sometimes when it displays, it makes that field really wide. It's kind of hard to work with. So I'll just leave it at 75 right there. Okay, and I think there we go. So then that one's good. I'm going to add another new field, and this one I'll call type. There we go. It's going to be text as well. And oops, not default domain. I want to select down here this stream type. Okay. And so with that, and I'm not going to worry about the length stuff here, but I want to make sure I select this so that when I'm going into edit, add new little, lines for this creek and all this stuff, it's going to, as I'm putting in the name, I'll type that in by myself. But when it gets to the stream type, it'll give me that drop down and I don't have to think and work. Okay. So those are the two fields I want. I know I definitely want. We could add anything else, but we're going to stick with that. So name and type. I'm going to make sure domain is stream type for the type one. And I'll go ahead and hit next. Okay, spatial reference. I don't really have choices here because I made that data set. So we'll leave that as is. Tolerance. And with, I think the next 3 pages here are all like this. We don't really need to worry about this. It's all these defaults that are in here will work. And you can read through this stuff, but it's basically stating, look, if you're making, clicking these different lines here, where do we start to assume that these lines are the same, right? That's the idea. It's kind of an abstract concept, but it's just a way for the computer to deal with very, very close objects. And you can see, this is tiny. We're going to leave that as is. Resolution, same kind of deal. Don't worry about it. Storage, don't worry about it. We'll leave that as is. And I'm going to go ahead and hit finish. And so it's doing all this stuff. It's thinking. It's created it here. It's brought it over here. But there's nothing that shows up, right? Because we haven't created anything yet. If I right click, go to attribute table, and I've got nothing. Nothing exists in here yet. There are no actual features, but you can see name, type, all of that, right? So the next step is to actually, create something, start editing things. And I think this is a perfect spot to save what I got. I'll stop this video and then we'll go ahead and make a part 3 of this thing, just starting from here, getting in and actually creating a new feature, seeing how that works, how to save it. And I'll explain what I want you to turn in for this specific exercise. All right, so save what you got. Hold tight and you don't have to hold tight. By the time you're seeing this, the video will be done. It's not like it's a live stream, you moron. So don't hold tight. Just click the thing that's there and go on to part 3 and all right, enough. See you in a bit.